education for individuals, such as increasing literature rates. So, increased literacy rates. By having access to reading materials, individuals are able to learn how to read. And through learning how to read, they have the chance to both find jobs and get higher wages. One study I looked at during my research for my senior project essay, it documented how individuals who were illiterate were unable to fill out job applications, so they were unable to get jobs. And so by being able to read, you both have the chance to get a job that you want, as well as earn higher wages because you're more likely to have a higher level of education. Another way that public libraries are so important for rural communities is the way that they provide internet for individuals who may be unable to afford this internet or who cannot have internet at their house. So internet restrictions in the United States are fairly widespread. 100 million Americans do not subscribe to broadband internet or high-speed internet. Even though they can have it at their house, they're unable to afford it because it costs a lot more than internet that runs at a lower speed. And the problem with having internet at a lower speed is that sometimes, especially during the pandemic, there were families who both for their jobs and their children, who were students at the time, they were unable to turn in their work, upload it, or download work. And this prevented them from either being able to maintain good grades as a student or getting their work in for their job. Additionally, internet in the United States is also at a point where not everyone is able to get it where they live because of their house location. So this, along the same line, it prevents individuals from being able to do work with their job or turn in work as students. In addition to that, 14% of urban households lack broadband, while 19% of rural households lack the same service, which just goes to show that rural communities are impacted more by a lack of broadband. So for providing public internet, libraries also give individuals a safe place to study. So in terms of having a safe place to study, I know that I didn't have internet at my house, so being able to go to the library when I got to middle school was really helpful because a lot of my assignments had to be turned in online or needed the internet to complete. Additionally, looking at other families who may live in a household where there are a lot of people, going to the library provides a quiet place to study and complete work. And for individuals who may have difficult times at home, going to the library can just be a safe area to study. Another way that libraries can help rural communities is the way that they improve community health. So one of the ways they improve community health is seen through educational programs. So in 2017, millions of patrons were able to participate in educational programs. And some of these programs included citizenship classes and GED classes. So looking at citizenship classes, individuals who are already part of a community had the chance to become even more part of the community just because they were able to vote by becoming citizens. And then looking at GED classes, if you're unable to complete high school, then you can get a GED and further your education. Another way that they improve community health is by aiding individuals who have been through a natural disaster. So in my research for my paper, I looked at a study that observed library services in 12 communities separately impacted by tornadoes. The libraries provided a range of ways to help these individuals, which included housing city command centers and even helping people fill out FEMA forms. This just helped individuals who really down on their luck and had already gone through an extremely traumatic incident have a chance to get back on their feet. Now we'll examine libraries during the pandemic. So 99% of all public libraries closed during the pandemic, but with this closure, libraries were able to adapt surprisingly well, just in terms of how everyone else was impacted by it. They were still able to provide digital services to students. They were combating food insecurity for low-income individuals. They were really helping the communities that they had previously served in new ways. Personally, during the pandemic, which occurred in my sophomore year at high school, I had to do all of my schoolwork in my mom's car outside of the Wolcott Elementary School building where the public library was located at the time. And this was very challenging, but it also gave me a lot of gratitude towards my community because they were paying for this service at the library, so I was able to maintain high grades that I'm proud of. So I'm just really happy that I was still able to complete my work even though I didn't have internet at home. So now I'll move on to my field research. So my field research centered around the Glee Merritt Kelly Community Library, which is Wolcott's public library. In 2020, the library made a move from its previous location in the Wolcott Elementary School building to the historic railroad station. They made this move in part because previously patrons who were coming to the library weren't sure if it was just a school library or if it was the public library, so it made it more accessible to patrons, and it's also given Wolcott Elementary more space. So even though the move started in 2020, it hasn't been completely carried out because the pandemic impacted it. Even now, the children's section isn't completely set up because the shelving that they ordered hasn't been able to arrive on time due to shipping that was impacted by the pandemic. So what I wanted to do was just help the public library in any way that I could because it's helped me so much in my past. So my mentor was Sally Gardner, who's the librarian at the Glee Merritt Kelly Community Library. She's been there for nearly 38 years. She was really resourceful during the pandemic. One of the things that we did for part of my field research was actually bagging up graham crackers and frosting, as well as crafts and candies for a gingerbread house making event. Previously, before the pandemic, that event had included students from the community coming into the library, but because they couldn't come in due to the pandemic, it allowed students to still have that chance to do that and have some normality in their lives. I also entered books into the database. A lot of the books were donated, so it was really nice to see that community members were giving the library the books that they no longer needed. I deleted books from the system that had been used a lot or sort of falling apart. It was also nice to see that because it made me realize people still go to the library, they still use books a lot. I covered children's books in this protective plastic so they last longer. I did work with the spine labels on books. So it just gave me the chance to learn a little bit more about my library that I hadn't known before, and it gave me an in-depth look into everything that goes into being a librarian. And time for my conclusion. So both from the research I did for my essay, as well as my field experience, I learned a lot from the public library. So in terms of the benefits, they provide rural communities. They provide literature services, there's the public internet that they allow community members to use, and they improve community health. Going to the Glee Merritt Kelly Community Library just gave me a chance to examine how the library in Wolcott is sort of like a living room, because individuals, no matter their political views or their religious beliefs, just come there and can gather together and have a chance to be on friendly, open grounds, and it was just really nice to see that. And then this is my works cited page. Yeah. Now it's time for questions or comments if anyone has any. Yes, Ms. Virginia.
So, do you think you'll be a librarian, or has that ever crossed your mind?
That has definitely crossed my mind. I know it's actually crossed my sister's mind too, Esther. But I don't think I'm going to be a librarian. I'm also really interested in nursing. I applied to nursing at UVM and I was lucky enough to get in, so I think that's definitely where I'm headed right now. But potentially, maybe I might be a trustee for a library in the future or just volunteer, because it was a really nice experience to work there, or volunteer there for a little bit. Ms. Miller?
Who is the library named after and why?
So the Glee Merritt Kelly Community Library, it's named after a woman actually in the Wolcott community who had a really large book collection, especially children's books, and she had children from the community. She gave them the chance to read books before there was a library in Wolcott. Actually, one of the seniors here, Amelia Egan, I believe on her mom's side, is related to the woman the library is named after. So, yeah. Any other questions or comments? Oh, okay.
Oh.
You did a great job.
I'm
So-
17 minutes, wow.
What?
That's 17 minutes, well, no,
You can always, yeah, are you expecting some other people coming?
At least one more.
Yeah, all right. So yeah, you have, yeah, it's like some time before yours, so people can get up and, yeah.
Take a minute to think about it.
So do you still volunteer?
I have, so most of the time I
In
go,
the real world, you don't really write that many essays. Like, it's a good skill to learn, but it's not the most important thing as it kind of is in schools. So as you can see with the variety of articles, there are so many different kinds of articles you can have in a newspaper. There can be like research pieces and opinion pieces, and you can have like a Q&A piece, or there are comics, and it's such many different ways of writing that can be really useful to learn for your life. One of the most interesting is a way to like find people who you're going to interview for your thing, and techniques for how to interview, which, I mean, it just helps to develop social skills doing interviews, and a lot of students are really scared to like reach out for help and do emails and stuff. And with an interview, you kind of have to do that. It forces you to. And yeah. So building confidence, you'll have upperclassmen support. If you're working for a newspaper, it's likely your like senior editor or the leader of it will be an upperclassman, and as an underclassman, it can really be helpful to have someone older than you, but not like fully a teacher, help you with your writing and work through writing stuff with you. And then published work. It looks good on a college application to have your work be published somewhere, even if it is just in your school newspaper. And it can build a lot of confidence just to see your name like under an article that you wrote. Like even here with this presentation, I mean, I'm fairly proud when I see my name on it. It's just a good feeling to have your work out there. And then going back to the real world opportunities thing, with writing, like you're not going to be writing that many argumentative essays in whatever job you end up in. I think the vast majority of jobs is going to be more like research writing for an article or a report or whatever job you have, whatever you're ending up writing. And the environment, especially if you're with a newspaper, you'll have deadlines and other students who are leading it, as I said earlier. And it'll feel less like, with school, it kind of just, you think of it as just school, but it could be like an extracurricular. So you'll be doing it more because you want to do it and because you feel loyalty to your comrades rather than just doing it for your grades within school, which is much more how the workplace is. And then with community, so it'll highlight a lot of similarities and differences with people. Again, with my TA, I did a project a week or two ago where I had students try to figure out a thing they had in common, and then they had to present on it. And a lot of them had a lot of trouble with it, which, I mean, we're all like Raspberry, we're all pretty similar. I don't know, I thought it was really interesting to watch them struggle with it, because to me it was so obvious that they were all really similar, but they just couldn't see it. And I think with a newspaper, we'll write articles about things we all have common interests in, and talk about the school and the sports we care about. And it's just a great way to like bring people together. And celebrating differences, obviously you're not things that are all the same for everyone. So like, if someone happens to be a really good playwright, then you might write about their play. Or if someone is a really good athlete, then you could write about their athletics. And I saw all of that at U32 with the U32 Chronicle, which I think is my next slide. Yes. So this is a picture of the home screen of the U32 Chronicle. As you can see, the tabs across the bottom, they have like hundreds of articles under each one from the past, it looks like 50 years. So in the arts, they talked about their art program at U32, which they have a whole wing dedicated to. And I think it's part of how it grew so large was the report they did on it. And then the Chronicle Classroom is all about things that go on, obviously, in the classroom. And they did a really interesting piece I read about how U32 teaches race in the classroom. And a lot of students felt really uncomfortable with how it was handled, which, I mean, when I read through it, I was surprised at how in-depth it went, because they interviewed lots of students of color, and they interviewed teachers, and the teachers had their names out there, which I thought was really interesting. They were willing to learn and try to change, and I think the newspaper had a lot to do with that. Then they talked about things in the local community, like a student there transferred from Hawaii, and she had a business, and they wrote about the business. Proficiencies, like all schools in Vermont, they're switching from the ABCD system to proficiencies, which is a 1 through 4 system. And in most schools, it's been a pretty rocky transition. So having some articles about that has helped them, I think. School politics, obviously, student government and that kind of thing. Sports, again, pretty self-explanatory. And then they did a really interesting series about the unknown names who keep U32 running. And they talked about the head of the grounds crew and some janitors and the lady in the office who they have a specific lady who mans the door, and they just do a profile of how long they worked there and what they think of their job, and it was just really interesting. And then I have no idea what woolly mammoth is. I've never clicked on that one before. Yeah, that's that. So for my field research, Mr. B, our English teacher, was my mentor. And the first couple hours, we mostly just spent talking out what a school newspaper could look like here. We went over formatting ideas and whether it would be online or on paper. And we looked at different types of articles I could write, which we eventually decided I was going to try to write, do a research piece. I was going to have someone else write me an opinion piece. I was going to have someone make me a comic. And then I was going to send out a poll and have people do a Q&A type thing where they could ask questions about, I didn't quite decide what they were going to ask questions about, but that was the idea. And then we decided that he has a friend in Colorado who's an editor. His name is John Cameron. He's the editor-in-chief of Selector News, and I think he's a freelance journalist as well. And he had done a lot of really interesting stuff. He outed a scandal at some nightclubs around Denver where he worked. I don't remember exactly what the scandal was, but he had a lot of really good insight on how to manage writers and how to get interviews with people and just different techniques to do that with. And then the last bit of my work was I was trying to get interviews for my research piece, and I interviewed some of my classmates, and I tried to use the techniques you talked about with letting them talk until they were finished, and then giving them 10 more seconds to think. And then most of the time I noticed that they still had more to say, which was really interesting. I'd never thought to do that before. And another thing he had talked about that I began to work on but never finished was having a style guide for your writers. So you'll have rules on the Oxford comma, for example. Both ways that you can use an Oxford comma are grammatically correct, but if you're doing a newspaper, you want everyone to have it the same way. So for a school newspaper, what I would do, it would probably be 10 or so rules, but he was saying for a full-on newspaper, it can be up to a 100-page book or so of just grammar rules, which that was pretty interesting. And then my conclusion. So yeah, at Craftsbury, we don't have a newspaper as of now. I hope to start one with this project. I ran out of time. I thought that this was going to be in May, and I was hoping I could get them in the next couple of months, but it was a stressful year. It didn't work out. And I think it would really benefit everyone here. The biggest thing that I thought was how little students know about how schools are run, and how none of us really like that. We don't know what's going on. People are really antsy about it. Teachers, it just feels there's a really big divide here, I noticed. And I think having a newspaper could help to bring us all together. And Craftsbury, there's a lot of negativity, again, I think coming from we just don't know what's going on a lot of the time. And we really do have some amazing opportunities here that people tend to look past. And with a newspaper, in theory, we'll be able to document both the good and the bad for an honest view of what Craftsbury is like, and hopefully be able to improve it in the future. Thank you. Yeah,
I have a couple of them.
okay.
So it was really exciting to hear you talk and had some of those ideas of what you wanted to get done, like the articles. Did you get any of those articles done at all? Or-
I started working on mine, and I never ended up finishing it. And I asked a couple of my classmates if they would be able to write it, but then I didn't realize how intense senior year would be for all of us, so it didn't feel right, like following up with them to
Okay.
add more to their plate.
Uh-huh.
But I think if I had involved more like lower classmen, we would have been able to get a good product out.
And how do you think you 32 students have been able to do that? Is that part of a class they're doing it? I mean, I remember
I
being a
think-
club when I was in high school, journalism was a club that we met after school and did.
Yeah, I think there is a journalism class they can take there,
Okay.
and I don't know if that's directly connected to the newspaper, but I imagine most students who do the journalism class are a part of the newspaper. There were a couple kids in my classes who were taking journalism that wrote for the newspaper. Any other questions? Yeah.
All right, so say you get your first edition out of
Yeah.
this hypothetical school newspaper.
Yeah.
What is one challenge of Craftsbury Academy and one success of the school that you would highlight?
I didn't want to write about challenges and successes. I wanted to try to remain a little more unbiased than that and just write a factual piece. I was going to try to write a piece about the senior project, actually. I interviewed a bunch of the students from this year, and I was hoping to interview you because it seemed like you had a really positive experience with it. And then I was going to talk to a student from last year who had a more negative experience with it, and just try to paint a more complete picture of it so that students can understand what they're getting into and just what it's like. And yeah, I don't know. Someone else wanted to write an opinion piece. I don't remember what it was about, but I think that was going to be a little more biased one way or another. Yeah?
So just hearing, I wanted to say that my son had an incredibly positive experience here as a senior project, and he still carries it on in his professional world. So just to say that we feel really positive about his experience that he had. We also help him shape it to be that for himself too. But and I guess this is a little bit of a challenge for you in hearing. I'm wondering why you think that older instructors aren't able to relate to students as much. For me, that sort of fits in a little bit of ageism, and I question where you get that idea that we as older instructors can't somehow relate to students.
Mostly through personal experience with the older instructors I've had. And I still think they're very able to teach, like their teaching styles work, and I'm still able to learn from them. But I just don't get like the same like depth of conversations with them, and they're like less understanding of what's going on, so they're not as able to like relate to me if I need to, like within our lives, I mean, because obviously in the world they know what's going on, but with like, I guess, teenagers, and especially right now with the internet, there's like so much going on in teenagers' worlds, and younger students are more likely to like be into that because they were alive when in high school, I mean, when the internet kind of came up. I think the internet is really the main divider that I think keeps ages more apart. Yeah?
What's your biggest takeaway from this experience, whether content related or process related?
I can do one for each, I guess.
Excellent.
Process related, it was definitely asking people for help, like to write for me. That was more difficult than I expected it to be. I thought I should be able to ask people, and then, not that they would just do it, I guess that it would just kind of happen. And then when I mentioned it and everyone said they would, and then I mentioned it early in the year, so I didn't think they would have to write it for a while, and then I just never was able to come back to them and ask for more, because all I ever hear from my fellow seniors is how stressed they are about stuff. And I just didn't think that I could add like a page or two essay to whatever they were going through. And then content related, I guess the interview with the editor was really interesting to me, like the style guides and how big they can get for big things. That was really interesting. And the interviewing technique was I was pretty impressed with how every single time I asked a question, people did have more to say than I thought they did.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting thing to learn. Do you find yourself taking that into other parts of your life?
I I mean, I haven't yet, I haven't had that much time to, but I imagine I will.
Yeah. Just in like any conversation.
I guess I have when I'm teaching in here a little bit,
Mm.
just letting it, if there's silence, not jumping to the next thing, just letting it sit for a second,
Yeah.
Agreed.
because people tend to come up with stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's a great lesson.
anyone else? Yeah,
So I'm curious, I think that your conclusion, you say you feel like a newspaper could be a good way to like bridge the divide between like disgruntled students and just like the way things are.
Mhm.
And you were at U32 for a year.
Yeah.
And they have like a 50+ year long standing newspaper, so do you see like less of a divide there between the student body and the teachers? And do you think it's the newspaper that's attributed to that?
I don't think the newspaper is completely what it is, but I think the culture of having a newspaper might have caused that. They like, I don't know, there's just like, in every part of the school, there's a ton of student voice involved. Like, I mean, we have hiring committees and stuff where we have students involved, but like every policy they do, and the newspaper writes articles on new policies that happen and stuff. And yeah, I think the newspaper has a lot to do with it. I wasn't really there for that long, and especially with COVID, I was only there for half the year. But the newspaper did really stand out to me as something that was an interesting piece that could hopefully improve what we have here. I think we would just have to see in practice if it did.
Right, yeah.
So do you see any of this kind of work in your future?
Potentially. I'm looking to major in sociology, and then I was hoping to either use that for some kind of education or not really sure what else. Education probably most likely where I'll end up, but journalism I think has been my number 2 option for a while. That's something else I might want